Hey everyone, welcome to the 209th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have an amazing show for you. We are going to be talking about, my goodness, where does Siri and the HomePod fit in with Apple's new services strategy? We're going to be talking about cybersecurity in the wake of a company getting a new round of funding. Plume, the mesh Wi-Fi company, has a new security service, and we're going to talk about what those things mean and how useful they are so far in the smart home. Plus, we've got some new low-powered chips that harvest their own energy. Google is teaching robots with machine learning. They're not taking over the world, but they might be able to better sort toys, which is equally important. Plus, we're going to talk about ethics in AI. And we've got a lot of news bits from UPS, the NYPD, and everybody's favorite hamburger stand, McDonald's. Plus, this week's guest is Eve Mahler, who is the head of innovation at ForgeRock, and she is going to be talking to us about managing identity for the Internet of Things and how we're going to get rid of so many password prompts. Holy cow. It's a lot to look forward to. And we're going to hear from Joe Britt, the CEO of Affero, on how to use data properly for actual insights. All this and more awaits you after a word from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is IoT World. All of you are invited to IoT World, which is the intersection of industries and IoT innovation. It's happening in the Santa Clara Convention Center in Silicon Valley on May 14th through 17th. This is the 6th anniversary of IoT World, and they will welcome over 12,500 IoT professionals, exhibitors, and startups. You can connect with strategists, technologists, developers, and implementers to put IoT into actual business verticals. To learn more and register to attend, visit iotworldevent.com. That's iotworldevent.com. Okay, Kevin, I am recording this at the lovely afternoon in Helsinki, Finland, which is where I am this week. I am actually learning a lot about IoT here in the Scandinavia region, so you're going to get all about it. Probably not this show, because I'm a little jet-lagged.
Is this the Stacey on IoT World Tour?
It's our world tour. This week it's Finland. Next week it's Stockholm. Week after that, back in Austin. Let's kick it off. This week, Apple had a big announcement, which I don't really need to watch this. It is probably not going to be hardware related, but I did tune in because, how can you not? And Apple really, they heard Wall Street's focus on the services market, and they were like, we will provide. They offered a subscription service for newspapers, newsletters, and other subscriptions. And there is now an Apple credit card.
And don't forget Apple Arcade, which is their subscription for $10 a month to play 100 or more games, all you'd like, instead of paying for each individual game.
I did forget Apple Arcade. How dare I?
All
right.
You're not a gamer. I am, but you're not, and that's okay.
That's all right.
Yeah.
This is why we work well together.
Exactly. They did have some hardware that it all came out the week before, and none of it was HomeKit or IoT related, which I think would kind of become numb to waiting for anything new there.
Yes, I'm not holding my breath. Although the AirPods, the new and improved AirPods, are indeed new and improved.
Not in the ways we had hoped and heard, though. We thought there would be more sensors, health-related stuff. It's really just minor improvements in the Bluetooth connectivity and the battery life and the addition of wireless charging.
I'll take what I could get, right?
There you go.
Hey! That probably means we're just not there yet for health sensors in in-ear devices.
I would say Apple probably isn't, because there are devices out there that do offer, there are headphones with in-ear sensors and such, but Apple doesn't typically do things until they're ready to do it, so clearly they weren't. And really, this brings us back to something they did do a long time ago, being at the forefront of digital assistants, and haven't done much since.
I saw this news and I IM'd Kevin. I was like, Kevin, what does all this mean for Siri and the HomePod with all of this services strategy that Apple has unveiled? And Kevin's answer may not surprise you.
I struggled to find really anything, because all of these services, there was obviously no mention of of Siri. Sure, you can control your Apple TV and music subscription and such by voice. That's not new. There's nothing HomeKit related here. So they've got the HomePod out there. They seem to have, I don't want to say not abandoned it because clearly it's there on the market still and for sale, but nothing new is happening with the HomePod and nothing really new is happening with Siri. And I don't see any tie-ins to their digital assistant or HomePod with their services right now.
And that's what kind of surprised me because Amazon, for example, has historically, Amazon is the original middleman. It delivers products from all over the place, and it is a platform that I go to find all kinds of crazy stuff. And it's steadily increasing its role, trying to take a cut out of every transaction. That's Jeff Bezos' stated goal. And so, in so much as, we talk about it on the show, Amazon's digital assistant, Madam A, it's not yet an integral part of Amazon's strategy here, but I do think Amazon does have a strategy involving Madam A. And voice shopping isn't so far gaining a lot of ground, but I do think Amazon is collecting device data from the smart home and getting users comfortable with having Madam A manage more and more of their lives, that soon it will manage their shopping, or it might just make shopping easier through programs like, Amazon Key, which is where you can let Amazon delivery folks into your home if you have a certified smart lock and a camera, or just the smart lock.
I think I agree with everything you said. I think Apple also is a middleman for services and purchases, but in a different way, mainly within its own ecosystem in a sense. They obviously have third-party partners with apps and so on, but they get a cut of everything. Everything you do, Apple's getting a cut of everything in the iOS ecosystem. And they actually did expand beyond their ecosystem in one of their services because they said that the Apple TV app is coming to several smart TVs. So they're doing it a different way, I think.
When they expand beyond their platform, like we saw this with iTunes, remember way back when they finally did a Windows version of iTunes and everyone rejoiced. Right. There was much rejoicing.
And Apple Music, which was originally Beats Music and started out on Android, is obviously Apple Music now and is available on Android as well.
So maybe they're just expanding to other platforms around entertainment, whereas something like Amazon and Google is expanding their digital assistants around. Their platform encompasses all kinds of other hardware, whereas Apple's like, nope, not going to do it.
Correct.
There's no real great answer here other than this services strategy doesn't seem to incorporate a digital assistant really at all. Apple is clearly not welcoming the open ecosystem that I think is necessary for the smart home and even a successful digital assistant. So I expect them to keep having a pretty crummy experience there and to double down on privacy as the reason its experience is not awesome.
Yeah, I think that's really the standard operating procedure for them right now.
It was worth talking about since everyone loves Apple. I would say maybe not for the smart home. Let's move on to, a fun topic, cybersecurity. So this week, we got big news. CyberX, which is an industrial IoT security startup, they raised $18 million led by Qualcomm and Invent Capital, which is in Prague. And CyberX is a company that I've dealt with a lot. They do a lot of reports around industrial IoT, viruses, malware, bad practices, all of this stuff. This is basically going to just expand CyberX's sales and business development. It's pretty much a straight up investment. We expect all the expansions. What's interesting about CyberX is it has focused almost entirely on industrial IoT, and the software monitors network traffic on equipment and then figures out what a normal data flow looks like. And then when the network traffic doesn't follow that behavior, it says, wait, no. It will also look for weird data structures. So if your industrial centrifuge starts sending out weird versions of its data, the CyberX is going to flag that equipment. And then it also looks at who's accessing, like which individuals are accessing the network. So it's a pretty broad array of things. And we're actually going to talk about something similar in the smart home for consumers soon. But the reason I pulled this funding is because we're seeing a huge need for this as things come online and as things that were formerly not connected come online. So MIT Technology Review actually had a really good overview of the Triton malware. And this was first discovered on Schneider Electric stuff. And it basically attacks safety systems, the programmable logic controllers, that sort of thing. These are the things that control the big honkin' machines that run inside industrial plants. And the MIT story basically, whatever I thought about Triton, I was like, oh, Triton, it's malware, it targets industrial IoT. I didn't think of it as in quite this alarmist language, and MIT calls it the most murderous malware.
Wow.
Yeah. It is designed, PLCs are for health and safety, both for physical workers in the plant and also just for making the plant operate as it's supposed to. So I guess in that sense, yes, you could blow up a plant by getting awry of the safety systems, which is what the MIT Technology Review article is trying to state.
It's actually interesting to me that at first I was like, why are companies like a CyberX looking at industrial only? But when you explain how it monitors for deviations in data and network traffic, it actually makes total sense that companies like this focus on industrial, not to oversimplify things, but in the smart home, you've got so many variables and people surfing different websites, doing different activities, etc. In a plant, things should be doing the same thing, mostly the same all the time. So it's, in a sense, a little easier to detect or look for something that's out of the norm. I'm curious about what companies will do in the smart home because of the wider variables, but it just makes sense to me now.
And that's a good way. That's not the only thing you should do with industrial IoT security. You probably should have some auditability around your data, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And there are definitely companies providing that. And there should be encryption for data. And so there's several layers that need to come into play, but CyberX definitely solves one of the layers. But the other story, so after MIT Technology Review did like this deep dive on Triton and its potential for harm, prior to this, an aluminum producer, an aluminum plant called Norsk Hydro, was struck by ransomware. And this ransomware actually shut the plant down and their losses from this particular incident have reached $40 million US, which is crazy. They basically, because their systems were attacked by the ransomware, they had to shut things down, and they're gradually now ramping up production. So there's a lot of questions here. Is that the sort of thing that CyberX will solve for? In this case, if it started behaving weirdly, I don't know if it would catch the ransomware before it launched the attack, basically.
I suspect not, only because ransomware is a little bit different in that it won't take actions like in a plant and make the plant blow up. Instead, somebody has access and takes control of the system and can pretty much shut it down and say, I'm not turning it back on until you pay me X million dollars or whatever it is. So and I don't know.
And you don't even have to attack the actual physical plant infrastructure. You could probably take out just the computers, the database, the office database, and you'd be fine.
Yep.
So there's this shows the two different vectors of attack. Equally catastrophic. I shouldn't say equally because, obviously if oil refinery exploded and spewed toxic gases everywhere and killed a lot of people, that's much
worse than not having enough Coke cans to fill up. Yes.
But from a company and an economic perspective, both attacks are things you'd really want to avoid. So it was worth talking about just to kind of drive home how important cybersecurity is, how even in an industrial system, which may not be connected to the internet, nation states and other hackers are targeting those systems as well. And so life's going to get real interesting, you guys. That's the bottom line, I guess. In other security news, let's move over to the smart home. Plume, which makes a mesh Wi-Fi system, they announced their own security service. I had actually heard that this was coming a couple weeks back. It was not surprising to me because pretty much everybody else, Comcast, Eero, other companies I can't think of right now, all have these types of services. And again, they're usually monitoring your network traffic. They're saying, hey, your thermostat probably should not be talking to China. That's weird. Let's shut that down.
You know who doesn't have one? Google Wi-Fi.
What? It doesn't have any. Does it have parental controls?
It doesn't have a add-on subscription type security service. It does have security features such as parental controls and guest networks and all. But what you're describing from Plume, I don't know. I've never heard Google talk about it. I'm sure, I just don't know. There's no mention of any over and above type security.
Here's the question. A lot of these services are predicated on the idea. They're services through a service provider. They're also boxes. Bitdefender, Cujo, Norton has one. I think it's called Core. These all exist and you can buy them. My question is, do we really need them? And so far, the answer based on so I got the Eero service just to see what it would look like. The answer seems to be no. The things that are getting attacked are my computers and my phones. The IoT stuff, not so much. And part of it is because I tend to buy decent stuff. I don't put weird no-name brands in my house.
Right.
And I know some companies, some of the more well-known IoT companies, they're actually proactively doing network monitoring on their gear all the time anyway. So doing it is just another layer. And I'm not saying that I am just one person. This is all anecdotal. This is not actually true data. But so far, I haven't seen an attack stopped that would really warrant paying for this. I think the ad blocking is nice.
Of.
No, it gives me stats each week.
Okay. See, that's what I think is missing from Google Wi-Fi. I'm not saying it should be there or shouldn't be there. And your question about, is it even necessary? I don't know the answer to that question. I think that's probably more of a personal comfort level thing. But I just went to the Google Wi-Fi security features webpage and they bullet point 4 things: firewall, WPA2, automatic updates, and TLS communication. There's no network monitoring mentioning or about anything like that. It's interesting to me.
So maybe if Google really thought it was necessary, they'd probably do it. They have a lot of engineering talent.
They're pretty smart people, I hear. Yes.
So in some ways, I think this could be 2 things. One, they're using fear and anxiety over your smart home being hacked to get you to buy a subscription. And this falls into the need for a subscription revenue source for a connected product, right? Because they're trying to continually update these things. They're trying to add new services that make it valuable to you. So in Plume, for example, has talked about adding a subscription fee for its devices, which kind of freaked people out when they talked about this. They were like, what? No. So this could just be a way to legitimize charging people a monthly fee.
Yeah, it could be. And actually, you have Eero at your house. I think you pay, $10 a month for a similar service?
Yes.
And the Plume deal now is $60 for the year, so $5 a month.
Yes, but I do get ad blocking. I get a VPN. I get a password manager. I probably get a pony that I haven't paid for. I haven't actually picked up yet. I don't know.
You get a pony and you get a pony.
So I don't know. I'm not sold on these, you guys. I'll just be honest. I'll be real here. Not sold.
I think a lot of our listeners, just based on comments on the Stacey and IoT website and in our voicemail, they actually are concerned. And again, I think that's a personal choice. And I think it's probably better to be overly protective than not. But I don't pay for any of these services. That's just me personally.
Hack Kevin's house. Get on it.
Go for it. Hey, somebody just turned my lights off. Wait.
Oh, no. Not again. All right. Let's talk about chips. Atmosic, which is a company in California making low-powered SoCs for the Internet of Things. They have now announced a PV, so a solar-powered radio that you can put into an IoT device, and your battery will last a long time, is basically the reason you would buy this. Atmosic basically designed a chip that could run a Bluetooth radio in a small application at very, very, very low power. And the idea was you could put, a tiny little battery and a small PV on this thing, photovoltaic cell, and it would just run forever. And that apparently is what they have done. I wrote about them a couple months ago. I think it's a cool startup.
It's smart for them to combine photovoltaic and then I think they call it on-demand wake-up technologies. And they say, obviously I haven't measured it, they say enables 10 to 100 times lower power than other similar chips. So
Right. And basically the idea here is if you're going to have a sensor and you're going to have a billion of these things running around, or maybe even a trillion, depending on whose analysis you believe, you cannot be changing their batteries all the time. You've just got to set it and forget it. And that's what this technology could help enable. So, moving right along, let's talk about
robots.
Woo-woo!
Which, of course, I love to talk about. So I was very interested in this story from earlier this week on the Google AI blog, showing off the tossing bot, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a robotic arm that tosses things. Initially, the robot did not know how to toss the right items into the appropriate bin when sorting things, but using Google's AI, it took about 10,000 grasp and throw attempts, 14 hours that took of training time. They now show that the tossing bot has accuracies of up to 85%. And that's amazing to me because in such a short time, this arm has learned how to properly sort things into the right boxes, sort of by itself, by analyzing results over time.
And unsupervised learning, y'all. That's a big deal.
That's what I do every day, unsupervised learning. I just think about, these massive warehouses where we have people going around, like say at an Amazon warehouse, doing all the picking of products and whatnot. And I know they've got some robots in those warehouses and all, but when you start combining the mobility of a robot then with the self-learning of, hey, I can go pick this product, I know where it is. Yes.
Or just think about it in recycling. Right now, we're actually having a recycling crisis because China is like, yeah, we don't want your crappy recycling. And a huge percentage of recycling isn't sorted correctly. So if we could somehow automate that so people don't have to do it, because it's a yucky job, no one really wants it, you give it to robots and poof, we could actually lower the total cost of recyclables, which would presumably encourage us to recycle more. Yay.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of potential here. And the downside is that there are currently people that have jobs that do these types of things. But honestly, I think people could probably better spend their time doing other things. So I love this.
They should start a podcast. It's all the rage.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, other robots. These robots are flying robots.
Yes. You saw the UPS now using drones for medical payloads?
I did. Does this mean I get my new kidney delivered via drone?
Well, it wouldn't be delivered to your home, but the drone could actually deliver it to the hospital if you're getting a kidney transplant. Absolutely. There are some limitations here. Granted, that this is all part of under the FAA as well. This got approval. I should say it's a test program right now, but the drone can carry medical payloads up to about 5 pounds, so maybe even a couple kidneys then, over distances up to about 12 and a half miles. So again, a very specific use here, but lots and lots of potential in a very time efficient manner for something that when you need, say, that kidney or a heart or whatever it might be.
When you need a kidney, you really need that kidney.
When you need a kidney, call UPS. It's just amazing to me that it's a very specialized but important and highly impactful project right now.
Yeah, and I just looked up the average weight of an adult human kidney is a 1/4 pound. So you could fit the kidney plus the dry ice to keep it, or I guess it's not dry ice. Whatever ice. I don't know how to transport a kidney.
Order 3 and get a discount. I mean, come on. Free shipping.
I'm like, yes. No, this makes a lot of sense, especially in anybody who's sat in congested New York or San Francisco traffic. This is going to be quite literally, a lifesaver. So,
absolutely.
Exciting. What else do we have in the news bin? Oh, speaking of New York City, the New York Police Department is using AI to detect crime patterns, which, Kevin, you seem very excited by this.
Well, I think it's interesting and a bit scary. I mean, we've all probably seen Minority Report with future crime and so on and so forth. Yeah, but the New York Police Department actually said this month that they're using AI to track the crimes and spot patterns. They've been doing it since late 2016, which I found very interesting. They call this patternizer. It's not obviously spelled correctly because nobody starts up things and spells them correctly. So it's NIZR after the word pattern. But there's some people who are rightfully concerned about racial biases being reinforced, and it's going to open up things to a lot of scrutiny, I think.
Yeah, if we're going to make the world more data-driven, I think we're going to see very starkly how we have structured our society to advantage some people over other people. And I think when put in very black and white terms through kind of data analysis, we'll no longer be able to lie to ourselves and say that this is an individual's fault, and we'll have to start looking at culpability of us as a society, which could be interesting, or we could just shrug our shoulders and look away.
I will say, even though I think they should have disclosed this maybe in 2016, the New York Police Department is taking a slow approach in using this because they're not using it for crimes such as rapes and homicides. They are basically using it to track petty larcenies, to ingest data and gather, analyze, and so on. So I think that's probably wise, but I didn't want to totally say they're doing the wrong thing here. At least there's a measured approach here.
Speaking of data, McDonald's made a big acquisition of a tech company? Question mark? Yes, McDonald's is acquiring Dynamic Yield, which analyzes all kinds of data, and McDonald's will use it at the drive-thru to basically upsell you a product based on weather, time of day, what you ordered, all kinds of good stuff.
Yeah, it's a rather smart use of external data, and I'm curious to see what happens at the drive-thru next time I go.
Do you go to McDonald's often?
Define often?
I don't know, once a week? Once a month?
Oh, yes and yes. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay. No, I'm not trying to shame you here. I'm just I don't know. I don't go to McDonald's very often.
I go there too often. I readily and publicly admit it, and that's all I'm going to say on that topic.
Okay. Well, Kevin, I would like you go soon and start documenting what you are offered, and let's see how that changes over time.
I go for testing purposes.
There you go. See, now you have a reason to go other than hunger. All right. Those are the big stories for this week. So I think it's time for our Internet of Things podcast hotline, where we answer your questions. The IoT podcast hotline is brought to you by Schlage. Schlage's wide variety of smart locks let you create the smart home of your dreams. Learn more about Schlage's smart home solutions and compatibility with Amazon, Apple, and Google Assistant products, plus more at schlage.com/IoT. And as part of their sponsorship, we are giving away a Schlage smart lock this month. So if you would like to be entered to win that lock, give us a call at 512-623-7424 with your smart home questions, and you will be entered to win a Schlage connected lock. We must get all of your entries before the end of March, so that's March 31st at midnight Eastern Time. We can only ship them to the US and Canada. I am so sorry, everybody else. But still, call us with your questions. We might answer it. This week's question is from Joe. Let's hear it.
Hello, Stacy and Kevin. This is Joe, and you may use this on the show. I recently had motorized Z-Wave window blinds installed and was able to connect them to my Wink Hub without problem. However, I was disappointed in that the Amazon Echo did not discover them. I was hoping for them to be found at least as a generic Z-Wave device that could be voice controlled to turn on and off to raise or lower the blinds. And I could find no related Madam A skill. While the blinds manufacturer is Graber, the Z-Wave motor is used by others, Valley for one. I was wondering if you had any tips or tricks to get the Echo to recognize the Z-Wave motor. Thanks.
Oh, Joe, I have been there. Exactly where you are now. I have connected my Sofie blinds to my Wink Home Hub, and I did it in a weird way as a Z-Wave device. And not only can I not connect it to Madam A, I also have it backwards. So instead of when I say open the blinds in the app, it actually closes the blinds in real life. This is apparently a known flaw that happens to lots of people, so yay. But this is not what you're asking. You would like for it to work with Madam A, and here we have good news and we have bad news.
Yeah, the good news is you can get it working with Madam A, or Google Home if you prefer. The bad news is you can't do it with Wink. You would have to do it with SmartThings. So yes, unfortunately, you'd have to replace your hub. And that's because the way Wink actually sees that device, it just treats it as, what would you say, Stacey, a generic type?
It's a generic Z-Wave device. And the challenge is Wink supports Madam A only for supported lights. So you can do a lighting shortcut as long as the lights are supported. And granted, you could make your Z-Wave device look like a light, but it still isn't supported by Wink. So it won't actually work with Madam A.
Right. And technically, it doesn't quite work with SmartThings unless you actually change it to a dimmer switch in SmartThings. There's actually a device handler that handles this, so you don't even have to change it to a dimmer switch, but most people probably aren't going to, install that and so on. So you can change it to a dimmer switch on SmartThings, and then it would work. That's a terrible answer because I know you have Wink. I have Wink as well. Stacey has Wink. Unfortunately.
But the SmartThings hub, it's not crazy expensive. I think it's $99 right now. Sometimes it's even as low as $70.
Right. Yeah. I mean, actually, my quote-unquote SmartThings hub cost me $10 because I bought the USB SmartThings link stick that goes into an Android TV. So that made it a hub.
I think that was also like a special deal, though.
Because they like me?
No, it was like the holidays or something, right? So
they don't like me. I think you're right. It may be like $30 or $40 for that USB stick. Correct.
I don't know their opinions on you, Kevin. I'm sorry. So that's your good news, bad news for the day. Sorry about that, Joe. And good luck. Maybe you'll just invest in the IKEA Trophy blinds when they come out in August, and that should work with Madam A and Google Assistant.
I would replace my hub before I replace my blinds because I have a feeling those blinds or the motor for that probably wasn't inexpensive.
That is true. That's why I'm still stuck with my janky setup. Sigh. All right. Well, that's it for that. It's time to say goodbye to Kevin and then hear from our guest, Eve Mahler, who is the head of innovation at ForgeRock. We're going to be talking about why you won't be entering as many passwords in the near future as you do today. Yay! But first, a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Affero. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from this week's podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Affero, and I have Affero CEO Joe Britt here to talk to us about data and AI. So, Joe, you and I have been having a series of conversations, including on topics like the Bank of Things, using Bluetooth Low Energy to create a secure payment platform, and the platform approach to IoT. And this week, I'd love to talk about data, analytics, and AI. But first, would you remind our listeners what it is that Affero does?
Yeah, Affero provides an IoT platform that simplifies how you connect anything to the internet. We can help you build business cases, take you all the way through rollout and ongoing management of your entire fleet of devices, as well as data analytics. Customers tell us that Affero is the best choice for end-to-end user experience and developer productivity, and it's also beautifully designed, really easy to use, fast, and very, very secure.
So, Joe, there's no AI without data, and increasingly, there's not enough data without IoT. So can you explain for us the relationship between these two concepts?
Why do we care about artificial intelligence and machine learning? AI ultimately gives us insights that we can use to achieve objectives. But what do we have to feed AI with? We have to feed it with structured data. And where does that structured data come from? Well, it comes from anywhere, anything that can generate data. And one of the biggest problems that we have with IoT is structuring the data the right way. Many other IoT solutions allow the developer to just send free-form data up to the cloud. The hazard with this is that the developer doesn't always think through how the data should be structured to best serve the artificial intelligence engine. And without that planning and forethought, it's very easy to create a huge amount of data that either has to be normalized before it can be used by AI, or in the worst case, just can't be used at all. So Affero takes a different approach.
How does Affero do it?
In many AI applications, the data that you're dealing with comes without much context attached to it. Now, humans may be aware of the context, but the metadata to describe it just isn't there. The best possible solution is to have what we call structured data. where there's a data schema and each field is labeled and understood. And that's what the Affero system does. From the outset, Affero guides the developer through giving each captured data element that needed context. In this way, data captured using Affero is already ready to be used with AI, machine learning, and also used in conjunction with other structured data sources.
Thanks, Joe. These have been great. Before we go, please remind us where people can go to get more information about Affero.
You can always go to affero.io/go-big as a great place to start. If you're a developer, check out developer.affero.io. And you can check out all the resources that we have on affero.io.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Eve Mailer, who is VP of Innovation and Emerging Technology at ForgeRock. Hi Eve, how are you doing today?
I'm great, thanks Stacey. Hi everybody.
So she, if you guys haven't recalled, she was on the show before, probably about a year ago, and we talked about identity. And I really thought we'd have solved this problem by now, but I still have so many passwords, so much difficulty logging on to devices multiple times in a month. I'm actually getting more frustrated, not less. So we're going to talk about why that is and maybe some of the technologies that might help make it better. That sound good, Eve?
Yeah, sounds awesome. Yeah, it's not the kind of thing you maybe solve in a year. People have been working on it for maybe 15, 20 years. So,
by golly, these are smart people. They should be here by now. We've solved all kinds of other problems. I feel like the best place to start is to break down for you and I probably have different definitions for things. When I think about logging into things, I'm like, that's my identity on these devices. But you're like, nope, that's authentication. So let's tell me the difference between the two.
So, identity as the information that represents you, the stuff that's true and trusted about you in a digital form. Authentication is the act of proving that that information goes with you. So it's a part of the equation, but it's just kind of I think of it as a small part of the equation. And what the companies that want you to prove that you're you to them want to do with that information is give you a safe experience and give you a personalized experience. And they want you to be a partner in the security of your account and so on. But they also want to help you pay for things and help you have an experience that is connected to you and help sell you stuff, of course. So authentication is part of it. It's not the whole part. So authentication is, it's an act. It can happen continuously. Oftentimes we experience it as the beginning of that Wall Street Journal article that you pointed me to about username and password hell, that sees it as the beginning of a session that we start with that company that we're having that digital experience with.
Okay, let's talk about that because this was an article that really resonated with me with my, 60 some odd devices in my house. And I'm constantly being asked to authenticate myself to them. And what is going on? In this article, the writer promised that he outlined the problem. And then he said, but guys, it's going to get better because we have new standards coming along the way. So explain to me first, why all these companies need me to constantly log into my account. Good Lord.
Yeah, it is kind of constant because there's so many companies. And he did mention the sign in with Facebook button and how he's never going to do it. But it is actually kind of popular for people to do that. And that enables people to kind of reuse, say, their Facebook account for multiple companies, multiple accounts.
So when I log in with Facebook and Google, then they get all that data about where I'm going, right?
They get the data about where you're going. And the companies that leverage that sign in with whoever button, they're getting data from your Facebook account for them to use. So, it's a mutual benefit for Facebook or Google and that company. And then you get the benefit of having sort of an easier sign-in experience. So I guess you could say it's a mutual benefit all around, but there's also some privacy content.
Yeah, I'd rather use a password manager or maybe have Chrome. Well, if Chrome keeps my information, then I'm sharing it with Google, I guess.
The companies that give you the choice of sign in with Facebook as a button versus creating a whole new password and, not using sign in with Facebook, it's good that you have the choice because you get the sort of more privacy protective version. Some companies don't give you that choice. And I tend to be more privacy protective and not take that option. It's actually called social sign-in when they offer the Facebook or the Google button. So I tend not to use that because I don't want to share Facebook information or Google information with these companies. That's one of the strategies of trying to solve this, what, the writer at Wall Street Journal was calling the identity problem. A lot of times for solving this convenience challenge, it really is an authentication problem because you're trying to enter the service and you don't want any friction in entering the service. And that's where another solution to the problem can be a password manager. And that's, one that I frequently recommend to people. Oftentimes I recommend it on Data Privacy Day, January 28th every year, when everybody who's not a security professional or an identity professional goes around saying, well, what do I do then? And I say, well, there's a lot of good password managers that can help you, reduce that friction.
Okay. In that particular article, this is not the solution they talked about coming to save us all from the tyranny of having 8,000 different passwords and remembering them all at a moment's notice. So,
yeah, they're introducing a new standard actually called WebAuthn, Web AUTHN, which was kind of sedimented into the World Wide Web Consortium by a .org called FIDO. And that is helping to bring more passwordless methods of authentication, including some biometric methods of authentication, things that might involve fingerprint, facial recognition, into the browser level, which is where we have some of the worst problems that people experience. And so WebAuthn has sort of hit full standardization as of last week, and the browser makers have been quite enthusiastic about this and are supporting it. That's been kind of a watershed for getting potentially stronger methods than just username password to be supported in browsers, and that's great. That's actually really good for the future of authentication, the authentication portion, if you will, of identity.
Let's talk about this a little bit because there's things that need to happen for FIDO to happen. One, people have to implement it on the browser side and on the application side, or is there device side aspects? Like, what needs to happen for FIDO to actually work for an individual or an individual's device? And then the second thing is, this only works right now on browser-based authentication. So what does that mean for apps?
It's actually the biggest barrier, I would say, has been that browser makers are few and powerful and can do what they want. And getting browser makers to change has been a big question mark. But the good news is that WebAuthn has been absorbed and committed to by the browser makers that we tend to care about. So I think that this barrier is going to fall in the case of WebAuthn. In the case of applications and in the case of FIDO, it's actually sort of FIDO 2, WebAuthn plus another piece of FIDO 2.0. That's been, I would say, well received. And I think that we can expect that once the browser makers finish their cycle of incorporating WebAuthn, then we can expect that we'll see some progress, actually. Generally, what we see is that when it comes to devices, when we think of smart things, they tend to rely on smartphones and the applications on mobile devices. I think that they'll be able to take advantage of these advances.
Okay, so I could have this additional authentication even if I'm signing into an app.
Correct.
Okay, so here's where things get really fun, though. Not only am I asked by devices to log in at random things oh, I've logged you out for your own safety, which is fine. I get it. So I'm logging into individual apps. But then adding a whole nother layer, sometimes I want to link my apps together. So I'm like, hey, Nest, I want you to talk to my Amazon Echo. And then the Echo's like, hey, you got to insert your Nest password. And I'm like, okay. Back and forth I go. So I look at things like that. Is that something that I should see get better here?
I think it will get better. And the article actually talked about this as well, referring to tokens. So when it comes to browsers, we usually think about cookies. And people now know about cookies, I think, because we've been through the whole GDPR apocalypse. And, we've all sort of said, yes, I accept that there are cookies in my browser. The equivalent when it comes to anything that's not just sort of a browser is a token. Typically, what apps do in order to give you the best possible experience, even if it's insecure, is it has tokens that last forever or a really, really long time, which is why things that aren't, let's say, your bank app tend to leave you just logged in all the time. Like if I think about my, consumer bank application, they just never ask you to log in again, except if it is your bank app, every 30 days or whatever it is, yeah, you do have to log in again.
Right. I think of a token like a key to my house. I'm going to give it to someone and then I'm going to revoke it after a certain set point in time because you shouldn't always have the key to my house. That's what's happening with these apps and with credentials.
That's right. And businesses, if they're smart, they are revoking them and saying, look, I got to be sure they're you again because these things degrade in value. And you could have, as the article points out, you could have somebody else using your device. Now, typically, mobile devices tend to be single user. They don't have to be single user, but they tend to be. Whereas other kinds of connected smart devices, things like connected cars, for example, or smart home things, do tend to be multi-user. And that's especially where the security of them degrades. And you really do want to have these tokens be perhaps very short-lived. And that's where tokens really don't want to be what I call forever tokens. It really would be a good idea for these to not be forever tokens. And that's where things like passwordless methods of authentication really want to come to the fore. And that's where, this WebAuthn concept can be really quite valuable because, smart devices could have lots of cool passwordless ways to do biometric authentication using who knows what gait analysis or, all kinds of things that use accelerometers in our devices. The sky's the limit when it comes to clever authentication that doesn't just rely on typing some difficult string,
True. My daughter loves to take my Fitbit when I'm having a shower or something. She'll find it and she'll take it. And I would love for it to be like, hey, you're not Stacy. No, I'm not logging this. It doesn't happen, but that's okay. This is not a highly secure device. That's fine. But I see what you say. But the flip side of that is, because I am the keeper of the passwords on all of our connected home devices, I'm also I'm basically like the person everyone calls on when stuff goes wrong or things get unlinked or need to be relinked. And, it's a multi-user environment. And sometimes I wish that we had a way of authenticating, everybody who belongs in the environment with admin rights. So that has like a whole nother level of complexity. And I'm curious what you have to say about that.
Absolutely. So this is exactly where authentication, I can show you that authentication is really just a small slice of the identity challenge writ large. In fact, what I think you're talking about is wanting to delegate access to somebody. So if you think about what I'm shorthanding as identity is really identity and access management, what identity pros will call IAM.
Yeah.
So, right?
Now it feels like I need a whole IT staff to manage my house. I don't know.
Well, that's exactly what we used to call IAM when it's facing consumers. We've actually started calling it SIAM for consumer identity and access management. And exactly what you have to do in an enterprise IAM context, you don't want to have to do when it's SIAM because you don't want to turn regular people into system administrators. And I know you've kind of taken that on for your own home in a way, but a lot of people are not going to be able to take that on.
No normal human should have to run like Active Directory in their home. That's just too much. So what is the solution here?
So there's a concept a number of people have been working on for a long time. We actually just call it identity relationship management because it really isn't your grandfather's IAM anymore, right? There's for a long time I've said, how many light bulbs are there in my house? I mean, there's dozens of light bulbs. In fact, last time I talked to you, I lived in a tiny apartment, and now I live in a big old house. I got use cases for, smart security and smart home up the wazoo, and there's no way I'm going to be setting things like delegating access to somebody else on a onesie-twosie basis. It's just not practical over the long term. So, if I wanted to give access to somebody to some segment of the smart stuff in my home, I really want to do it by sort of the function they have in my life and the function that these things have in my life and, the role that they have. And, in enterprise IAM, we would talk about role management. What we quickly learned years ago is that you have a problem of role explosion, no matter how hard you try and keep it under control. And this is where even sysadmins, their minds blow up. So identity relationship management is the notion that you can actually keep it under control by thinking about relationship with people to other people and people to things and things to things. And this is where some of the newer technologies have come to the fore, like graph technology, which actually scales to follow kind of unanticipated relationships and answer questions quickly. This is like the technology behind things like Google search or Facebook graphs, like relationships between people. If you have like dynamically changing relationships, like I have a renter in my home and I want to give them access to some subset of the smart things, but then I just kick them out because they did something wrong, I can deprovision access quickly. So imagining that you connected the things to the smart things and the people to the smart things, and you need to get them out of there quick, you can actually do it.
And that would be automatic as part of the device and the app that's associated with that device? Or is that part of my management panel that's coming with my Echo or my Hub? How do I get this magic?
Well, you can get this magic. I actually just, at RSA last week, my colleague and I were demonstrating how you could do this with medical records and with benefit claims and prescription information and even Fitbit data using technology that is connected with the OAuth standard and the user-managed access standard and graph technology, in fact. And we were talking about dynamic authorization because this is the modern world we live in where everything has to be so quickly connected and disconnected and paired and unpaired and, associated and disassociated. We were literally talking about user-managed access, UMA, the standard, and identity relationship management.
And are people deploying UMA?
Actually, they are. One example is a mandate in the UK for something called the pensions dashboard, where it's people who have multiple pension accounts and pension. Think of in the US would be 401ks. So they're working to deploy how you would aggregate and share access to all of your pension accounts, and so you would share access to somebody like a financial advisor. And we're working with our customers on health-related information. And it would work with a dashboard kind of effect, dashboard or console that you would control from one place, data from multiple places.
So I would probably see my smart home hub people adopt something like this if I wanted to implement this kind of awesome automatic relationship management based on graph data in my home. So as a consumer, this sounds awesome. Can't wait for it to be on the horizon. What hope do I have for making my life easier in the short term?
In the short term, there are still going to be as many accounts as people have to log into. In the very shortest term, I do advise people to use password managers. Some people will be incentivized to use social sign-in. They'll log in with Google, they'll log in with Facebook, and it's up to each individual person to decide if they are the privacy fundamentalist, as privacy researcher called it, or perhaps privacy unconcerned, as that same researcher called it. I call them the PMI people. You have to decide if you're willing to use social sign-in or not and how you're going to manage all of those accounts. But the important thing is to realize that identity is not authentication alone. There are multiple reasons to think about what identity buys you. Identity is just plumbing to get protection, personalization, and payment functionality out of your relationship with digital services.
Awesome. It's kind of like I have to share GPS information to get all these cool, mapping data, understanding automatic turning on of things in my house. So here, if I'm willing to authenticate as often as needed, I can do cool things like pay with my Ring, actually.
That's absolutely right. It is up to you to determine how you have a relationship with these services and how much you trust them. Consumers are actually starting to dictate more of the terms of those relationships. And I think that it's possible for consumers to put in a little bit more into the equation.
Okay. Well, Eve, I feel a little bit better and a little bit powerless. I'm definitely going to I'm going to start calling on some connected device companies to start implementing some of this technology so I can ease my sign-in burden. Thank you so much for coming on the show this week.
It's been a great pleasure as always, Stacey.
That's it for this week. Thanks so much for listening. And remember, if you'd like more IoT news, sign up for my newsletter at stacyoniot.com. We'll see you next week.